be confidential for the board, but I would like to,
That's not what's in front of you this evening.
Yes.
Every year, we must bring the contracts for legal services back to the board to approve for the coming year any monies that we're going to expend against those contracts. So these are contracts that are in place for the 19-20 years school year, and then as we need services, then we would work against that contract. But they are required to come back to the board each year for approval.
okay, thank you.
Okay. We have one more item for discussion, which is Q.
So that's me. So what I was thinking, I was looking at Q, and it is in regards to advertising services. And currently we have the funding or the budget source as being supplemental and concentration grant funds. And after looking into this a little bit, it's not that I don't think per se that that advertising and photography isn't a valuable part of our overall community engagement. I just think when we're thinking about supplemental and concentration grant funds and their purpose is for our low-income students, our foster youth, and our English learners, I think that we should have the funding source be coming out of BASE or something else other than supplemental and concentration grant funds. I think that it's actually relatively cheap considering the service that we're getting back, but I would like to make a motion to approve this, but with the stipulation that the budget source be coming out of maybe BASE, and then with the idea or with the thought that there's a lot of things that are in BASE that I think that we can pull into S&C instead to kind of offset that, because S&C is specifically for those subgroup populations, and I don't. It really, to me, is more having to do with the misalignment that our LCAP has with what our actual services and programs that we're providing are. I think this is the best fit in terms of what we have in our LCAP. It made the most sense to put it here, but just because it made the most sense doesn't mean it actually makes sense to have it be coming out of S&C.
I think making a stipulation sort of changes the vote.
Yeah. So it would be I think it would be pulling it, making a motion to approve it with the stipulation that this funding source be coming out of a different
I don't
fund.
think the stipulation
I need to understand
is
that.
part of that.
I need to understand.
Yeah.
Are you, right now it's coming from the local, right? From the
It's
local
coming
sites?
it's coming
And
from
they make the
supplementary
decision that that's what
concentration.
they want. So you're saying we could have that, but have it come from the general?
Yeah,
Is that what you're saying?
Well, technically, the LCAP is just your plan for how you're going to spend money.
Correct.
But this is coming out of S&C in particular, and there's a difference between S&C and BASE. It's not really your general fund, it's your BASE fund, so that could be any different number of funds. It could be title funds, it could be, your lottery, it could be a bunch of different funding streams. But supplementary and concentration grant funds, specifically the $30 million that we get of our overall operating budget, are supposed to supplement and concentrate funds, i.e. programs for our low-income foster youth and our English learners. And so it's not that I disagree with the contract, I just disagree with the budget source.
So does that mean that if you take it away and you agree on the contract, then those particular sites will have a little extra money to work with to do more?
No, that would just mean that there would just be some movement. It really is, it honestly comes down to an accounting kind of mechanism, right? So, you have your codes for your accounting. And so rather than it being as S&C, I think it's 2.3, I want to say 2.2, one of those actions, rather than it coming out of that particular action and what's allocated for that, it would just be coming out of a different funding source.
So were you saying basically you want to bring Q as a separate item with that stipulation? So I pulled two others for separate votes. You want to make this a separate vote?
And then have a conversation, because I would be against it.
So,
And I can tell you the reason when we go into that. So we could approve the rest of the
Everything.
consent, but pull,
The
what is
Qs.
your Q? And
Q's
V
gonna
and J
be
for more discussion.
Q,
well,
J,
since
and
there's a
J.
motion on the board, motion
did
on the
the motion?
table,
Me.
Ellie made a motion.
Oh, can you
I
cancel
would
a second?
recommend that there.
I was going to
there's a
second.
Okay, you could
Now
go and
it's
second,
open
and I'll
for
have the
discussion.
conversation now.
But, oh, no.
Okay, we have a very wide net of low and students that qualify for this. I think probably about 75%. And when I first saw, probably before you were here, this contract, I look at as part of the community outreach, the self-esteem, the recording of, you know, events that are going on, and a lot of them are related to supplemental and concentration funding. So I wouldn't want to move it into the general fund at this point, and I would like to hear from staff why it's even, if that would be a good idea, or if it's in the right place. But from my thought process, this is our second or third year that we've done the photography and all those, it's, again, you know, just, I see those faces, and I know that if you see 20 kids, probably, and we couldn't identify them, but probably 15 of them are in that category, so.
Majority of our students are.
Yeah, I would be against moving it personally.
Well, it's a funding, I think that
Yeah.
might be an audited issue in regards.
I think.
I checked, but I checked other districts, and I just want to add on, it seems like this is the third time we have the media agreement, and my suggestion is, I'm not going against this particular media agreement, but other districts have Twitter feeds on the district main homepage, not just Facebook. So,
We added Twitter, didn't we?
no, we do not.
We did?
No.
Currently, we don't. We've
No.
I
had it
thought
in
we
the
did.
past.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Something
Twitter.
going on with our corporate thing.
Okay, so that's another way of outreach, and as far as social media, taking pictures is fine at the events, but the district website needs to be updated more frequently, you know, in regards to community outreach pictures, not just
Right, this is
graduations.
just one portion of it.
Right, right, but for 65,000, 25,000, you could take a lot of pictures. And we can have a Twitter feed, update what's happening on a day-by-day
But that's-
basis.
That's a separate issue.
Yeah, this one's just this, up
That's
to
a separate
65,
issue.
yeah.
This issue is simply, we're gonna fund this item, Q, in this,
Out of
Category.
some, S&C
Consent
or
items.
general.
and if you wanna bring Q out of that and put it as a separate discussion
No,
item.
we already have a first and second, so.
I'm just saying.
Yeah, and I think I understand that it is somewhat tangentially related, but there is and that's why I think that it's important to move this out, because when you actually look at the wording of what's on queue for this consent items, it says,
Do we have a motion to move it out for a separate vote?
Well, she already made the motion
I
to
know,
approve
but do we
it,
have
so
a
it's
second?
first and second. So
Okay.
we have to either vote
So
or,
we're in, okay.
but the one thing that we haven't heard is why is it in here? And I'd like to hear from staff, why is it in S&C versus general?
So every year we look at our budget and we decide what meets the goal and intent we believe, because some of it's subjective, and then others we get from feedback from the county who takes a look at our LCAP, and they have this year. We believe that this is a valid expenditure out of supplementary concentration. However, if the board were to choose to change the funding stream, we believe that there is a way to identify more services perhaps in the base that could be moved. So it really is just moving something that's being paid out of this pot over here and this over here. So it's still approval of the contract. I believe what I heard was the motion to change funding.
There's a motion and a second to bring it for discussion separate from,
No, the motion was to approve it, I believe.
With the changes in the funding.
Right, and here's my concern,
Okay,
it's
well, that's-
65,000, two different pots, until you tell me what's coming out of general, into supplemental, I don't wanna vote. I mean, that's not enough information for me tonight.
well then, do we have any plans of using these services before August 8th? Let me double check my.
But we're
calendar
not,
really quick.
we're not meeting in July,
That's why I said August.
Yes.
second Tuesday in August.
Currently, we have a plan in place to do some training videos, some back-to-school videos, and also to introduce any new management staff that we've hired with biops and that sort of thing.
I
So
may have a
we were hoping to use it prior to
Okay.
this.
I may have a solution. So let's say we approve it tonight, and then we can come back and move the money if that's the approve it as is, and then make a, with the inclusion that we come back in August, and if all of us agree, then we swap the funds.
Depending on what we're swapping.
I just don't feel comfortable with that, because the one thing I thought of immediately when I saw this is we do have 75%, a little like between 73 and 75% of our students that qualify for S&C funds, without a doubt. Part of the supplementary and concentration subgroup is foster youth. We are legally not allowed to take pictures of foster youth. So you're talking about an entire subgroup population.
Of how many?
It doesn't matter how many,
Just
that
small
money is
number.
for them. And so I just think that it's not fair that this money that's meant for them isn't going to them. And at the end of the day, it is just moving things around. But when we're looking at the LCAP and we're looking at just being accountable to the community, and also quite frankly, the students who are, who were the target of these funds, it just doesn't make sense for me. And we're going to have to do a ton of realignment next year anyways with the LCAP. And I just think that this is ultimately going to make our lives easier and hopefully make the folks who are working on the LCAP next year's lives easier when they have to deal with the momentous task of realigning all of our goals, realigning all of our programs. And so I understand that there is some hesitancy for just saying, well, we'll move it around. But the idea is that there are programs that we're funding in base that are going to English learners, I know for a fact, that we could switch around. And it's $65,000. At the end of the day, it's not a ton of money. But when you're thinking about services that are meant for a very, very specific group of people, and one of those groups of students is completely left out of this, yet this is meant for them, that actually, I mean, it is reasonable that, like I said, this is the best fit possible, but it doesn't mean it's the right fit. And we're leaving out our entire foster youth population. Whenever I think about using S&C funds, if it's not touching each of those groups, then I just don't think it's not a correct use of those funds.
But as a board, we do policy to sit up here and move the budget amounts. I'm not comfortable with it. Just sitting up here saying, okay, well, I think we should move this over here. I need to see what the implication will be over here. Mm-hmm. I'm just saying, as a board, we are high level. I don't think we need to get into the minutia. We can add it as a direction, as a conversation, but to sit up here to vote to move from one for the other, at this point, I'm not comfortable with it.
And I'm not comfortable using supplementary and concentration grant funds that aren't touching the students.
And
that
I
they're meant
understand that.
for.
It's just, I just don't think we could do it in one meeting. I think it needs to be direction to staff and they come back. I still haven't heard enough from me to be swayed to move 65,000 to general and have nothing yet to put over there.
How about instead of doing something that could potentially not be correct in terms of what we're required to do by the state, why don't we just hold off on voting on this until August? And I understand that there's going to be some delays in some of this promotional materials, but when I looked at the PO reports, it seemed like there's still a little bit of money. I don't know which one of these photographers we wanted to work on that stuff.
I think their contract ended from the last one.
Yeah, but we could still prorate. We could still retro.
But why
pay
can't
them.
we, we have to have 3-2 or whatever, 3-4, whatever.
Mhm.
As long as we have a majority, vote these in. There's nothing to say that we can't have a conversation about $65,000 and swap it at another meeting after we've had more.
Well, then why don't we just give the staff direction to do this, and then if they come back and say, you know what, it doesn't really make sense, then we could switch it around that way.
We need to have a vote on it because we have a motion and a second.
Right. We're
But
still having
But
conversation.
before we do that, I have a speaker who wants to talk about this issue.
Okay.
And that's Velma Wilson.
Good evening, and happy last board meeting before you take a break. I think we all can use an emotional break. But I had a question. So when I see this line item, and Ellie, I'm with you in some regard. Community outreach and engagement. What does that really mean? And when we look at the scope, because community outreach and engagement does not, to me, always mean pictures and footage. That's just a small facet of it. I really would like to see us get back to the piece of what LCAP really is pushing. The parental involvement, which will come with the outreach and engagement. And we have lost that. And I'm not sure where it got lost, but it's been lost. And I want to figure out a way that we can get back to what that money really should be allocated, and how we can get these vendor contracts that are up to be approved again to continue. I really believe that, yes, if we don't get our story and our narrative out via pictures, video footage, somebody else is going to show and they're going to highlight the negative. I totally am with that, because again, I was the one that started that whole push for the district to do that. But now I want us to get back also to realize and remember that LCAP, there is a specificness within LCAP that says parental involvement and engagement. And to me, using S&C to fund it doesn't give us that community engagement and outreach. And that's the part that I'm just unsettled with.
And this is the photography and the video is just one small portion of video of engagement. So I'm gonna bottom line it for me. I am not comfortable in voting it to put it into the general fund without the end, but I'm willing to listen in August if we wanna swap funds. I don't see where can be a problem. We can bring it back up and we can maybe have staff look into it a little bit better to say, this is where it should go, but for this evening, I have to rely on staff that says this is where the money should come from.
But that's not what she said. She said that this is the best
Who's she?
place.
Okay, thank you.
She didn't
I
say-
just,
yeah,
we
she
had
didn't
different
say
conversations.
that it had to have come out of here. The thing is, when you look at 2.2A and you look at community engagement, again, like I said, this seems like the best fit, but just because that doesn't mean it's the right fit. And I think that when we look at realignment next year, maybe we could create a separate action that talks about advertising. Maybe we could create an entirely separate goal. But we're trying to make a square peg fit into a triangle or whatever you want to call it. It's just we're trying to make things fit that don't fit. And it's not to say that S&C can't ever be used for advertising, but the way that it's written right now, there's no accountability from our point of view, from the way I'm interpreting this, that is really what 2.2 and the spirit of what 2.2A says. And all you have to do is look at the recommendations from this year and last year from our stakeholder committees about what the intent of 2.2, what the intent of Goal 2 school culture was. And yes, advertising and pictures is a part of that, but it just doesn't fit here. And
I don't believe it's advertising. I believe it's community outreach. Anyway, you've heard each story. Let's just go to a vote. I mean, to sit here and continue for.
We have a motion and a second to remove Q.
No.
No,
to
I'll
vote
take,
on it.
Well-
I'll take my motion off the table and I'll make a motion to vote on it separately.
I thought
You
we
sure
would
you
just.
don't want to table it?
Yeah, I'm okay with tabling
You want to
it.
table, what is, till next meeting?
Yeah. I think
Okay,
that, I
okay.
mean, if that,
Wait a minute, are we allowed to go ahead and table?
You can
She
table,
recused-
but
she
you won't
takes
have
back her- yes, you
the
take back your
photography and
motion.
videos that the superintendent wanted.
But we have a motion and a second.
But we
so
first
just
have to go
go
through the
forward.
motion, don't we?
Just retract.
No.
So I can motion to table,
I'll,
Q.
and I will second
Yeah,
it.
she took it back.
Okay,
So that way
so-
we just talk about it in August.
Right.
Okay, so now the maker of the motion took the first motion back, the
Yes.
second agreed. Now there's a new motion on the table to table it with the first and second. Now we call for the vote. Correct, everybody?
Fine. To table it for another month. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
No,
Opposed?
All those opposed? No.
no, 3 of us.
Now, given that, I would still like, if it moves forward, that we could look at it next month. But like I said, to sit here in open meeting and move funds, I'm just
Point
not
of order,
comfortable with
I
it.
didn't catch
I
the vote
hear
on that.
Gary.
We are tabling the motion.
No.
No, I'm sorry.
We're voting.
It was a motion to table. There was 2 yeses, Crystal and Ellie, and there was 3 noes.
Well, he never said no, but yeah.
Did you say no?
I meant.
I'm sorry, I
yes,
apologize. I thought
I
you
did
did.
say that. But, so basically, we'll bring it back.
Yes.
No.
Or-
Now we
or
could make another motion.
possibly.
We can make a motion. How about if I just make it easy? I make a motion to approve, item G as written. Q. I can't read my writing. Q.
Second,
All in favor, say aye.
as written.
As written.
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed?
No.
Okay, now we can have even a third one if you want, to bring it back, to look at it sometime after the school year ends. It's up to you.
She didn't retract, I'm not understanding what happened here. She didn't retract the motion to table it, so.
No, we voted and it failed. The motion, we voted on that and it failed 2-3. Then we voted to move item Q forward. And next, to
To approve.
address the
Yes.
concerns that you have, we can either, in future, we can say we'd like to discuss it in August, or we can actually, I don't know if we can make a motion to have a discussion in August about what you want to do.
We
I
do
think
not
as
need
a point of order,
I need a motion.
trustee Householder and I can make contact, and if she would like to put it on as an item for discussion,
That's it.
possible
Yeah.
action, we
Okay.
can certainly do that.
I just want to know that next time I put it on for a discussion, that every time, like that when I actually want to discuss it, that we can discuss it during the public meeting. Because it always seems like there's this kind of pool where it's like, okay, discuss this, talk with the superintendent, talk with people, and then when I do that, it seems like it's a problem.
I did not hear that in this meeting. You discussed it quite a bit. I apologize if that's
okay,
how
but
you
if I
feel.
want, if I want to bring this back up for discussion, I just ask that fellow board members respect that I do want to discuss this, and we might have to nickel and dime a little bit, might have to think about what we want to move around, but that we actually give it its due diligence, because as it stands, it's just every time there's always an issue.
Well, what I would like, and maybe this is where we're not understanding, is when we come back, we would be prepared. It was a surprise to me that you wanted to take it.
You got the email of my questions, which it completely outlined exactly what I was hoping to do this evening. So that's okay.
I
No, it's fine.
apologize.
Yeah, no, it's fine.
don't
I did
remember.
everything I was supposed to do,
Okay.
and that I thought that moving $65,000 isn't going to be that big of a deal. But I'll direct people to you when people ask me what community engagement, how pictures translate to community engagement for our foster youth.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, there were two items on these
I
consent
apologize.
items